from Kansas City, this is GovLove, a podcast about local government. I'm Lauren Palmer, the Director of Local Government Services for the Mid-America Regional Council, and your host for this episode. GovLove is produced by ELGL, the Engaging Local Government Leaders Network. You can support ELGL by becoming a member. Check out elgl.org for information on member perks and great low rates for individuals and organizations. Today I'm visiting with Eyal Feder-Levy, the CEO and co-founder of ZenCity, and Dan Ault, Chief Innovation Officer and Assistant Town Manager of Cary, North Carolina. Eyal and Dan are talking with us today about the importance of trust for local governments and the launch of ZenCity 360 as the platform for community trust. Eyal and Dan, welcome to GovLove.
Thanks, Lauren.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah, you're welcome. We're glad to have you here. Well, before we get into our interview, we're going to start with our signature lightning round. We always ask our guests a few intro questions to get to know you a little bit better. So Eyal, I'm going to start with you. Who, dead or alive, would you most like to have dinner with?
I would have to go with Barack Obama. I really want to know what a president does after they stop being president.
Yeah. What is he up to these days? I'm sure he's on the speaker circuit.
Yeah, I'm sure he is.
Dan, what about you? Who would you most want to have dinner with?
Oh gosh, this is a difficult one. There's so many people I'd like to. Probably an ancient philosopher. So for the sake of brevity, I'm going to go with Socrates.
Okay, you're going back.
For
that's
sure.
Interesting because Eyal chose like an alive current person. You went like way back.
That's right.
Tell me more about that. I mean, what are some of the things you want to talk about during your dinner party?
Well, I'll start. I would love to be able to connect the dots on what are some, maybe ancient truths, sacred truths that are timeless. So what was relevant then and the context it was relevant in, and then being able to, obviously with my experiences, transpose that to the present.
Yeah, interesting. Eyal, what about you? Other than what are you up to these days? What questions would you have for President Obama?
No, I'm mostly jealous that Dan's answer was much better than mine, but I think that I would love to ask about the current political climate, about how polarization has gotten, I think, much worse, and how everything has changed in that direction over the last few years. What would be his take, and if there's anything that he would do differently if he knew that this is where we're heading?
Yeah, interesting. Okay, well, I hope that works out for you. Like maybe someday you'll get that opportunity to have him over for dinner. It could happen.
Probably a higher chance than Dan's.
Yeah.
No doubt.
You've opened a window for me. I actually met President Obama once when he showed up unannounced in a city where I was city administrator. And it's like one of my golden fangirl moments when he said to me something along the lines of, "Oh, you must be very good at your job. This is a great community." Oh. And I, he's a good politician. I'm sure he says things like that to everyone he meets, but I just tuck that away in my heart. Like, I'm doing a good job.
That's incredible.
Yeah, it was a nice moment. All right, well, I'm going to move on to our next question. Dan, we'll let you go first. What is something people are surprised to discover about you?
Ooh, that's a great question. So I guess depending on which circle you're asking would depend on my answer. But generally speaking, at this stage of my life, oftentimes people are surprised that for most of my life, I've hunted in some way, shape, or form. I spent a lot of time in the woods. So that's something that tends to surprise people in most circles.
Interesting. Why is that? Because you were like buttoned up professional in your day job?
Yeah, that's a part of it. The types of other things that I'm interested in, technology things. So running in those circles, It sometimes is a little bit different. I grew up in the upper Midwest and spent a lot of time outdoors. So, more than actual hunting, I like to track game. So being in the woods and actually just seeing how close I can get to different animals and seeing what's present in the woods. So being really kind of connected to the outdoors is something that day to day, if you were to follow me in the Research Triangle region and in Cary, people would probably be surprised watching me in my day job. That's actually something I really enjoy.
Yeah, that's a good one. Eyal, what about you?
Good question. I think people are most surprised to learn that I'm very much not a dog person. Like I've come to live with dogs. We're a tech company. There's a bunch of dogs in the office. I need to get used to them. But generally, growing up, I really didn't like dogs, and we didn't have a dog until I left for college. So I met her only when I came to visit. And my wife and I and our kids, we have 2 cats, which is always a surprising thing for me to share because it doesn't align with being very outgoing and very social. At least that's what people tell me when I shy away from their dog.
Yeah, okay. I'm glad you told us that. We have had lots of cat versus dog debates on the Govlove podcast in different
Where do
episodes.
where do we stand on the cat versus dog on Gobble of participants?
Yeah, I don't know if I can speak like on behalf of our entire hosting staff and audience, but I am firmly in the dog camp. So I'm always like, really assertively holding that position. But I gotta say, AL, like maybe you're just not a dog person yet, because I was like not just like not a dog person, but an anti-dog person until like maybe my mid-30s when this dog came into my life and immediately crawled into my heart and made me love him. So maybe you just haven't met the right dog yet.
I'll take that. I'm definitely not a dog person yet. That will be my new answer.
But good for you as a like open-minded employer that you've got dogs around the office, like people can bring their dogs to work.
Yeah, 100%. And spending time with dogs is opening up my heart to the possibility of being a dog person one day.
Wow, this is great. This is my dream in life is to have a job where I can bring my dog to work and wear casual clothing. So I haven't quite figured that out yet, but like, you're giving me some inspiration here.
Is this a good plug to say that he's hiring?
Oh yeah, for sure. We always love to give our guests that opportunity to make a plug.
Definitely.
Okay. All right, final question. Eyal, what is one of your favorite places in the world?
One of my favorite places in the world. I would have to say, I think in terms of cities, I've had the privilege of visiting a lot over the last few years because we work with so many cities and counties around the country. I've been to many states and many cities. And I have to say my favorite city of all is New Orleans.
Oh, okay.
I was there for the first time in 2016 and fell in love head over heels and have been back 3 or 4 times since. I think it's such a unique place with such an incredible history and such a resilient community going through all the crises that communities went through, and also an incredible city staff, which we have a privilege to work with. So I think it's one of the most unique cities in the U.S.
Well said. It is very unique. The correct answer is Kansas City and its surrounding communities, but New Orleans is a very special place too. I can't knock that answer. Dan, what about you?
Well, I mean, both of those answers are excellent. Love both of those cities. And I truly, I mean, whether it's traveling around the world or elsewhere, try and find beauty in the micro of each city and location. I think that exists. But since I know I have to answer one, I'm actually going to go back to my roots a little bit. And my favorite places is being on the Great Lakes, and specifically Green Bay, where near where I grew up. So being on the water or on the Great Lakes is actually my favorite place.
Oh, home sweet home. That's a nice answer.
That's right.
I have spent very little time in the Great Lakes outside of like Chicago, and it's a bucket list thing. I really want to visit like Lake Superior. So this is good. You're putting some ideas in my head. Well, that's awesome. Thanks to both of you for giving us a glimpse into who you are. And now I'm going to turn our attention to really the heart of our interview and talking about ZenCity 360. But first, we always ask our guests to start by telling us a little bit about your background. So, Eyal, tell us about your career path and what led you to start ZenCity.
Sure. So I'm 36. I currently live in Tel Aviv, Israel, but by the time this podcast will be aired, I'll be moving to Brooklyn, New York. which is where our two head offices are. And I've had a passion for public service and for government for many, many years, and went to study urban planning based on that passion. And fell in love completely with the field. It started even before going to school. I used to be one of those people that attends public meetings and has an opinion about what's being built in their community and policies. And when I discovered that there was an opportunity to learn that, I was thrilled, and started out my career in local government, but working for the city here as a planner, then working as a consultant, and then eventually going back into academia and founding a research institute in Tel Aviv University that was the first crossover here in Israel between public policy and urban planning with technology, engineering, computer science. And that's how I really got into the power of technology and what it could do for the work of local government and how it could be a great tool in the toolbox of local government professionals. And based on that learning, my co-founder and I started ZenCity a little bit over 6 years ago. And today I'm proud to say that ZenCity is the largest community engagement platform in the world. We serve over 120 million people in over 300 local government agencies. And I'm excited to later have a chance to share a little bit more about our work, and especially the incredible work that the Town of Cary is doing that we're privileged to support.
Yeah, very good. Hold that thought. We are going to talk more about community engagement and ZenCity. But Dan, tell us about your career path and how you got into your current role.
Sure. So, I think it really began when I was actually very young, strangely. I've known that I wanted to work in government, since I was honestly 3 or 4 years old, which sounds very strange. I knew city management at about 7. And then as I grew up, I kind of just really didn't necessarily see how that was going to actually come to fruition. So it wasn't something I really thought about until my 20s. And then was fortunate enough to kind of get my foot in the door through a variety of internships. That was kind of my biggest question always growing up, was how was I going to get in? And then once I got in, I was fortunate. I had very good mentors and bosses, and they supported me and allowed me to really do tours of duty in just about every department. Well, really every department that cities have, core functions of cities. And the bulk of that happened in Elgin, Illinois, before Cary, North Carolina, and also a county in Wisconsin. And those experiences, came very rapid. It was almost like watching a video on, 2 or 3 times speed is the way I would describe my early years in local government. And so building off of those foundations, previously in Elgin, I spent a lot of time working on developing our 3-in-1 center and modernizing our technology platforms. And it was that work that then led to the opportunity for myself, as well as for my boss, who's the town manager of Cary, to come over to Cary and do some of the same things, but to do so in a much bigger and bolder way. So it's been, for me, all about getting a lot of different experiences in the primary functions of local government. Also went to school for political science and public administration, and have a master's degree in public administration. So that's what really, created the building blocks for me to be where I am today.
Okay, great. And just kind of as a foundational question for our discussion today, I want to ask both of you, with your diverse perspectives and backgrounds, what do you see as the biggest challenge for local government today?
I can go first here. I think it's the pace of change of society, and all of the kind of new capabilities that are cascading, as well as demographic challenges. As our population ages and changes, it leads to there's a variety of issues that come with a different degree of volume and velocity that hit local governments. And as a result of those societal changes, the ability for an institution that by its design wasn't necessarily meant to be fluid and adaptive has to adapt. So I think it really comes down to the polarization, and then just the rapid pace of change is really going to test the limits testing the limits of government institutions, including local governments.
Yeah, great. Eyal, what about you?
I want to agree with Dan a lot and double down on that. I think definitely the polarization that we're seeing, that we're used to seeing on the national and federal level, is something that, especially in the last few years, especially since the pandemic, has trickled down a lot into local government. We see that in our work across the country, that more and more city councils are becoming more divided in a partisan way, and that the discussions become more polarized, and that people in communities become more polarized around local issues that used to have more consensus in the past. And I think one of the interesting features of that is that it's really eroding to some extent the trust in local government. We can see from all the data and all the research that there's an ongoing decline in trust in institutions overall, but that used to be something that local government didn't feel as much. And over the last few years, in a rapid pace, we're seeing trust in local government deteriorate. And I think that this trust is definitely the building block of being able to do local government work, right? If people don't trust their police department, they don't show up to report crime, or they don't cooperate with investigations. And if people don't trust their county health department, they don't show up to get vaccinated. So trust is such a key element in our ability to be effective in the important work of local government. And I think that we're seeing a trend fast in the wrong way.
Okay, well, I'm going to give you both an opportunity to talk more about how we address some of those trends. I'll start by just giving us a quick overview of ZenCity. I know probably many of our listeners are your clients, or at least familiar with your organization, but for those who may not be familiar with your platform, tell us a little bit more about it.
Sure. So I think our company and our platform have grown and evolved a lot over the last few years. As I mentioned, we're about 6 years into our journey by now, and we were always fascinated by this idea of trust between communities and the local governments that serve them. We've always were interested in taking a look on how does that trust get built, and what could hurt that trust. And when we were starting out, our thesis was simple. In order to build trust, we really need to meet and exceed people's expectations all the time as a government, right? We need to either be aligned with what they're expecting us to do, or know that there is a misalignment of expectations and be able to communicate around that in an effective way. And in order to meet those expectations, we really need to understand what those expectations are, first and foremost. And one of the challenges that we heard again and again from the governments that we have talked to, and from our own experience in government, was that oftentimes when we try to hear from the community, we hit what one of our city managers calls the STP problem, the same 10 people that always show up to every community engagement forum, every public meeting. And at the end of the day, many of our opportunities to engage the public give us a really biased and skewed view of public opinion by only hearing from a small subset of the population. So when we were starting out, and I guess many of the listeners that have heard of ZenCity still think of us that way, we asked ourselves, what is the easiest way to get as many voices as possible from the community we serve? How can we hear the most people at once? And we found that in just taking data that's already out there, from what people are posting on social media, or reports that people are sharing, calls that they're making to 311. Wherever people are already sharing their opinion, we looked at that information and we analyzed it with some AI and machine learning to make sense of it. And we shared a perspective of what the public conversation is about. But over time, we saw that in order to really build trust, we need to layer that with other ways of engaging the community, because just listening to public sentiment in the same way that just running a survey every 2 years is not enough to really hear the voice of the community at large. So today, in our 360 platform, which we've just launched, we're focused on really hearing the community in a lot of different ways. We combine that online social sentiment, which is still a big part of our offering, with the ability to quickly run representative sample surveys, with the ability to spin up very quickly public engagement websites, and with the ability to measure people's satisfaction with city services post contact after they got a service. And all that together lives in one platform and provides hopefully the closest approximation we can get to what people actually think about life in their community and about the city services that they're using. And in other words, communicate that set of expectations to our customers so that they can be able to build that trust with the community that they serve.
Okay, great. So I just want to make sure I understand, like this, the launch you have coming of ZenCity 360 is what you're describing of layering in these additional tools to try to address community engagement.
Exactly. Like our approach is this. The way we've been trying to listen to our community is too limited. It biases us to the people that show up, to the people that are, we should say honestly, are oftentimes more affluent, or oftentimes better connected, or oftentimes of certain demographics. And we are strongly of the belief that we need to be able to hear more people around more topics all the time. And to do that, we can't use just one tool. We can't run a survey every 2 years, or we can't just look at what people are saying online. We need to combine different tools for different engagement types. We need to both listen to the millions of data points that people are sharing online. We need to also be able to engage the community deeply around a specific project or topic where we want to build stakeholdership. And we need to also be able to reach a representative sample of people that actually hears from all different demographic groups. And in our 360 platform, we, for the first time, allow all of that in one platform and can really provide, quote unquote, a 360 view. That's where the name comes from, of what the community sentiment, community perception is.
Got it. Well, Dan, I'm going to look to you to help us with a practical application of what we're talking about here. How do you and your team build trust with your community in Cary?
Sure. Great question. And we're very fortunate in Cary. Frankly, since I arrived in December 2016, our community, has had a high level of trust. I honestly call it like it's an endangered ecosystem of democracy. But that's something that we can't take for granted. So the ways that which we focus on building trust, there's a couple of different pieces to that. Some are, I would say, more micro level, and I think those are the most effective. It happens every day in our 311 center. We call our agents at 311 citizen advocates for a reason, and it's for that very purpose, to build trust, to assist citizens in an era where the world is complex. Everyone is feeling a sense of maybe not being fully knowledgeable or inferior in some domain in today's complex world. And being on the front lines in local government, it's really important, I believe, people to people supporting each other ultimately builds trust in government, realizing that it's just your neighbor that's helping you and so on and so forth. It also has to be done, I think, on a macro level, although I think that's overall less effective. And what I mean by that is larger initiatives that bring success and prosperity to the community, I believe, also build trust. People want to be part of something special. So you have those aspects. Another element that I think is really, really important in today's world that people are hungry for is candor. And so to build trust, you have to be candid. You have to talk about when you're successful, and you have to be candid and talk about what is a difficult challenge that the community is facing. And there sometimes aren't great answers. There aren't solutions to everything. And so being candid about that and mobilizing the community is something that's really important to maintaining trust and is important to that citizen advocate way. So I think it's about ensuring responsiveness and then maintaining a degree of people to people at kind of the micro level is how we build and maintain trust. And along those lines, how do you know exactly how to do that? How do you know how to, measure yourself? That's where tools come into play.
So how long have you been a client with ZenCity, and what prompted you to start utilizing this technology?
We've been a client since, I believe it's 2018 officially, although we certainly were interested in 2017. I don't remember the exact date. We may have had a pilot in 17, but so for the majority of my time in Cary, we've been using it. It's something that I've been looking at as they were being founded, even before I came to Cary. And really, what prompted us is my time in local government. I've seen just an extraordinary need for this. It's actually shocking to me that nobody has really filled this niche in local government management, or modernized to deliver this type of service that ZenCity provides. So, I mean, it was all about fulfilling our larger vision of creating the civic infrastructure of the future, which is simply the infrastructure we believe necessary to govern at the local government level in the information age. And so as part of that, the engagement piece is extraordinary. It complements 311. It complements, kind of our decision-making piece. So it really was our quest to do something bigger as a local government in terms of advancing and modernizing technology and modernizing to the current age that led us down this path to partner with a group like ZenCity, as well as with some other groups. But that's really what the prompting was. And ultimately, what that translates to is trying to get the right information to our employees so that they can serve citizens at the highest possible level. What I was mentioning, that citizen advocate way. In today's world, with the exponential kind of proliferation of data and so on and so forth, most local government employees, in my opinion, don't have all the information they need day in and day out to serve citizens at the highest possible level on the front lines. And so this is part of that quest to kind of further, give our employees the tools they need to serve the citizens at the highest possible level.
So speak more about that. I mean, describe how you're using ZenCity to funnel that information into your departments.
Sure. So we use it, as a listening tool. Anytime there's an incident, so that could be something related to public safety, generally speaking, or something that has a significant impact. So the listening piece is one piece. Then there's also the proactive piece that we kind of discussed a little bit on in terms of proactive surveys and proactive campaigns to get an idea of maybe some of those pockets that did not actively engage with us or directly engage with us. They secondarily engage with us. We have user groups inside of our organization that are power users in different areas that use ZenCity for their respective, kind of specialization. So that's really, kind of been our strategy on how we're using it, and then disseminating the information down and using it as a support function for decision making, and just to, contextually understand the environment we're working in as well, I think is fair as well.
Yeah. Can you give an example of a decision in your organization that was impacted by your partnership with ZenCity and the information you're collecting?
Yes. There's a variety of them that I could go through. So, I'll speak to one and then kind of generically explain how I think it has larger impact. It was a powerful tool for us from a policy recommendation and a governance perspective. As e-scooters started showing up in our community, there was a variety of different opinions on it. And it's not that ZenCity gave us like, oh, here's the answer, here's a solution. No, but it helped ground us in reality of what the community's thoughts were on the topic, versus, as we talked about earlier, whether it's the same 10 people, the loudest voice, or just kind of more generic emotions that people feel when there's change and disruption in their community. They can't necessarily articulate exactly what they're feeling, so it's just kind of an emotional dump. And then staff is left to try and interpret that along with what elected officials are also feeling themselves, representing the public. So what ZenCity allowed us to do is write into our staff report, anchor it with data, information, and all, kind of the holistic scan of what the community was feeling. Another kind of area that it falls into that domain where there maybe isn't a specific policy change that we've had so far, but it's leading to maybe a variety of policy changes, is our environmental campaigns and initiatives. Cary's the environment is at the top of our citizens' minds. There's no doubt about that. We see that in our survey results. We see that in our engagement. But then kind of going to one step lower in terms of, well, what do they really want us to do? Because it's a very broad area. And again, to cut through more of just kind of the emotional pieces of the topic and get into more what actually translates into actionable items for us, ZenCity, both from a survey tool, from a campaign tool, and then also a listening tool, helps us engage passively, actively, and kind of get more of the full orbit of the topic, which at times leads to action. But I also want to speak to these tools also at times tell us to maybe not act. And that's equally as important. Things aren't always ripe, or there isn't always clarity on a topic. And so you can't react to just every single kind of emotional outburst that comes from the community or from any one citizen necessarily. But to understand it in the broader context helps us understand, with very limited resources or with limited resources, where do we put those resources to serve the values that ultimately people hold dear, and to understand with limited resources, when you serve one value, you're maybe not serving another, to understand what the impact and the consequences of that choice is. So everyone kind of focuses on maybe the new initiative, but you also have to focus on some of the other things that maybe now aren't being served because you changed that. And ZenCity allows us to kind of do that in a really meaningful way. So we're not just kind of constantly chasing our tail. We're having our eyes scanning kind of the whole orbit of any one topic in all the different areas that we serve.
I thought that was interesting what you said about sometimes the information is telling you don't act because you don't have enough clarity around the issue. I mean, can you give an example of a time when that happened? There was like an emotional issue in the community and your recommendation was like, let's press pause here.
Yeah, I mean, well, there's a number of them. And what I really mean by that is sometimes we maybe outthink ourselves and think, well, maybe the community doesn't understand it. And what ZenCity sometimes surfaces for us, both from surveys and from the listening tool, is that maybe the community does understand it. And sometimes other citizens' voices are actually more impactful, or other sources are more impactful than our own. And so if there may be sometimes some negative comment or negative concern, but contextually, it isn't necessarily something we need to be concerned about or worry about. And at the same time, how do we balance maybe the feelings of both elected officials and staff that that concern could build into something larger? Well, ZenCity allows us to kind of manage that in real time. We had incident, and we've talked about this before on other publications, but we had a fire in a mosque in Cary, and really it became a national story before we even, the town administration had any idea it even happened. But we were able to manage, to understand how we had to kind of inform the community about it based on seeing how the community was reacting to it. So we were able to wait until there was the formal investigation, and we didn't have to necessarily over-communicate, which may have actually caused more concern. It turned out to be an electrical fire that had to do with the renovation, but it came at a time when there were other places of worship that had been, unfortunately, under attack. And so that was our number one concern right off the bat. But rather than jumping to over communicating what it was or wasn't, we were able to wait for the investigation to be completed, and also see that the community in their conversations were actually understanding of that, independent of our own communication, regardless of what was even being kind of reported in the national media.
Yeah, great example. That's very interesting. Eyal, I want to turn back to you. How has ZenCity adapted to changes in the social media landscape? I'm thinking about changes at Twitter or new emerging platforms like Threads. How are you all adapting?
Well, social media landscape is ever changing, and I think it changed a lot since we started back in late 2016, early 2017. And it changes both in the emergence of new platforms, but also in changes in how people communicate and share information on these platforms. So I think one thing that we've been doing a lot is follow all these new platforms. In the beginning, we only tracked Facebook conversations, then quickly added Facebook and Twitter. But then over time, we added Reddit and LinkedIn and many other platforms that we got information from. We are closely following the launch of Threads. That seems to not be necessarily picking up as much as Meta hoped, but we're following that closely, and we're starting to explore with our partners there how can we look at that information, but also in terms of the content that's being shared. Like, for example, in the beginning, we weren't able to process types of information that were not text, and over time we had the ability to process both photos and images and videos on our platform, which have become much more common over the last few years. We've added the ability to track paid media and the data that our partners are publishing proactively on the platform. So it's definitely something that we need to be constantly on the lookout, and surprises happen, right? Elon Musk bought Twitter, and a bunch of things in the API changed overnight, and we needed to react to that quickly. So it's never a dull moment, but I think the bottom line here is that the thirst that people have to communicate with people in their networks and to share their life experience and their lived experience in their own communities is something that is still very strong, even if we see, for example, Facebook declining in usage while Twitter and Instagram increasing in usage.
Yeah, interesting. Dan, what advice do you have for listeners who are intrigued by what you shared from the town of Cary and want to enhance their data-driven decision-making and community engagement?
Sure.
Where should they start? Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I would say certainly it's something you want to lean into. The world's changing. That's not going to change. It's not going away. The information age is here. It's only going to exponentially continue to proliferate. So I think it's one thing that you want to lean into it, but you go at your own pace. I think it's something that should be brought into the organization. I would encourage, other managers and assistant managers to, find people at the mid-level that can really run with it and resist the temptation to kind of put these tools into different categories. Figure out how to contextualize it into your organization. There's an extraordinary amount of institutional knowledge. And as we push further and further into the information age, it's blending that institutional knowledge and then being able to elevate it. It's not replacing it or changing it. It's elevating it with tools like ZenCity. And so in order for that to really kind of manifest in the most meaningful way, that's why I said people have to lean into it, including top management. But I would resist the temptation to decide what it is or isn't, what it can and can't be used for, right off the bat. I also would say you don't have to start at lightning speed. Start with a couple of folks in the organization that can grow it internally and then slowly start to kind of expand it into a larger offering. But I think it really is something that's going to, if nothing else, internally generate, kind of new prompts to ask a variety of different what-if questions, maybe the most meaningful what-if questions. And so if nothing else, if that's all this platform does, is it offers as a tool for the staff to have meaningful what-if questions for your community. It doesn't always have to result in an action, a policy, or something like that. It's just changing the mindset and the way people think within the organization. Well, then the tool's working. Then the tool's having an impact. Then the tool is something that then you can share with your elected officials to better ground kind of the overall decision-making in this era of emotional topics, polarization, and truly you can't chase everything. We've known that forever and ever, but now with the new tools that are out there in the consumer world, people are able to have a voice kind of whenever they want. In the traditional public safety side, if everyone called 911 at once, we wouldn't be able to respond. Right. But the reality is that people don't call 911 and 311 all at once. So we are able to respond in the most meaningful way. Well, the internet age is kind of a little different in terms of the voice. So this gives us an ability to be effective where we need to be able to kind of hear those that don't have a primary voice or a direct voice with us coming to our meetings, et cetera, and allow that to kind of permeate into our internal discussions and allow the staff experts to kind of use this as another vehicle to further ground decisions in terms of what values do we want to serve as a community and what values do we not want to serve as a community. And one of the things I'll say, it kind of goes to an earlier question you asked me about, kind of ZenCity. One of the things that I love about them and one of the things that they tapped into that it just is shocking to me that other tech platforms haven't is their hyper focus on local government and local communities, block by block, neighborhood by neighborhood, and so on and so forth. A lot of tech companies are influenced by the private sector world. That's good and bad. But something that's hyper focused on local government feeds, I think, very well into that governance structure. So I think it's something that really local government professionals should lean into. Not saying it's like this magic wand that's gonna on its own transform things without effort by the staff, but I think it's a really, really important tool.
Yeah, I think that's great advice. Like, you're right. Maybe it's not the end all be all, but it's a tool. And I loved what you said about just start somewhere. Like, start small with a
Right.
core group of staff and build on it from there. I think that's really practical advice. Thanks, Dan. Eyal, I want to ask you a question that's kind of a point of personal privilege. This is a topic I'm interested in, and I think it will be interesting to our listeners as well. I read on your website that some of your clients are using ZenCity's platform to engage citizens in addressing homelessness. Can you share more with us about that?
Yeah, of course. I think we all know that homelessness is a major issue across the country, and especially on the West Coast, where a lot of our partner cities and counties are dealing with a growing number of people experiencing homelessness in their communities. And this has been, to a lot of extent, even become a larger problem since the pandemic and the impacts that the years of COVID had on our society. And I think whenever there's a major issue that's affecting our communities, the question of what do people expect from local government, and what are their priorities, and what are their, to Dan's point before, the set of values that they expect to be brought to life in how the city or county answers the situation. Whenever there's such a big problem, it's really, really important to be aware of all that input. So I think we've done a lot of work around homelessness, and it can manifest itself in a lot of different ways. One example from we've done a lot since our early days, is to be able to evaluate public opinion around specific homelessness related policies. So other than measuring the direct impact of a policy on the people experiencing homelessness and the effect that they're having, some of the wider impacts of homelessness, like issues that are related to sanitation or to public safety, may affect the wider community. And being able to track and evaluate specific policy programs and see how they're changing public conversation online, or how they're impacting people's perception towards homelessness in the city, have become really, really important in policy decisions that cities are taking around homelessness. And another very, very interesting use case that we've seen a lot is to understand the importance of homelessness to the broader community. So, for example, in our representative survey capabilities, where we run these recurring representative surveys to ask people about their satisfaction with city services overall, or their satisfaction with public safety services, one of our questions asks about what are your main concerns, what are the things that you're most worried about, most concerned about, or what are the things that you think the city should address the most. And seeing where homelessness falls in that prioritization list has helped a lot of our city staff partners advocate to city council for wider policies, more investment of budget, more creative policies, because this is such a big issue, and have served as another way to measure and another data point of the impact of applying some of these policies. So, for example, in one case, we saw one of our cities on the West Coast implement a safe parking policy, where there was an area designated where people experiencing homelessness can sleep in their cars. And we saw some negative sentiment being shared about that online. And that, to Dan's point before about knowing when to act and not act, we've seen in a lot of other cases how this negative sentiment could kick a city into action and have them even stop an effective policy because they're worried about the public backlash. So in this case, we showed them the context of how much negative sentiment is being shared about it, and that it's not tens of thousands of comments; it's only a few hundred. And B, we were able to drill down into what are the root causes of the negative comments. What are people saying? They're not just against the policy; they're worried about X, Y, and Z, and that allowed the city to improve both the messaging and do some adaptations to the policy again, be more aligned with the expectations of their community and build a stronger trust while keeping a very good policy in place and having people even be happy about that policy and see sentiment change from negative to positive. So this ability to both recognize a problem as it's emerging, put it in context, and decide if you should take action or not, to Dan's point before, and if you take action, be able to drill down into a topic and understand what action would be the right one. All of those are strong capabilities. And the last one, which I think is, to me, the most exciting, is the ability to see the data after you took action, after you changed policy, after you changed messaging, whether it's representative survey data or online sentiment data, and see how we've made an impact on the community's perception by taking that action. Are we successful? Because it's so rare in government, unfortunately, that we get this chance to have a good feedback loop, right? To know in a short time frame what was the impact we did. And our ability to allow that has been very helpful around many policy issues, but homelessness specifically.
Yeah, I really appreciate you giving that explanation. That's really interesting. And that example you gave about seeing how the community reacted to like the safe parking policy, really interesting. I think this is one of the tough challenges for local government leaders of our time, and I'm always looking for innovative ways to address it. So I really appreciate you sharing that perspective with us.
Well, in so many cases, we've seen good policies go away because of that, especially because of that, those same 10 people, those STPs, where they show up at every city council and protest against something, and policies that would benefit the wider community sometimes get put on the back burner or even canceled completely. And the ability to put some of that in context and give data that is really, really, really comprehensive and proactively inclusive of the entire community is something that could serve as a very, very important tool in the hands of staff when talking about some of these things that might be bigger or wider policy areas.
Okay. Well, we have covered a lot of ground today. Is there anything else either of you would like to share before we wrap up?
Sure. I mean, I just wanted to say, and I think ZenCity meets this standard, is that something that's really important in local government is we need to bring technology closer to the work of local government. And ZenCity as a platform is something that can be used by people of a variety of different technological capabilities. But I believe this is just something that's really important. Technology isn't just for some groups in local government. It's for everyone today as a tool. And in doing so, bringing it closer to the work, we're bringing ourselves closer to the people. And that's what enables really special micro moments between citizens and staff, as well as those larger kind of macro moments, and bring it full circle. That's what's going to restore trust in local government.
First of all, thanks, Dan. And I just want to say that I think the most fun part of my work is getting a chance to collaborate with incredible professionals and seeing the meaningful impact of local government work. I really think that the people working in local government have one of the hardest and most important jobs out there, and the incredible service that everybody listening to this podcast does for their community is really, really inspiring. And Dan and his team are probably one of the most inspiring teams that I've had a chance to collaborate with. And it's been a real pleasure listening to what you had to share today, Dan. Thank you for that and for the partnership.
Thank you.
Hear, hear. Thank you for that nice shout out for local government officials and Dan, especially to you and your work in Cary, North Carolina. I really appreciate both of you so much for coming on the GovLove podcast. As we wrap up, Eyal, I'm going to ask you, if you could be the GovLove DJ, what song would you pick as our exit music for this episode?
Oh, wow. What song would I pick?
The pressure's on.
Oh, the pressure is definitely on.
You can ask Dan for an assist if you need to.
Dan, any good song request?
Yeah, I mean, if I had to pick one, I would do "Turn It Again" by the Red Hot Chili Peppers.
Okay. I have not heard that song in a long time, so I can't wait to hear it on this episode.
Wonderful.
Yeah, very good. Well, thank you so much to both of you. That ends our episode for today. Thank you to our audience for listening. You can reach us at elgl.org/govlove or on Twitter at GovLovePodcast. This has been GovLove, a podcast about local government.